Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a piece of history that's been almost completely overlooked. It's the incredible story of the Chinese Azharites, a small group of students caught between their faith, their country, and the massive grinding gears of 20th century history.
Okay, let's just dive right in. This whole story revolves around just 33 students. Think about that. Their journey starts in the 1930s as a mission for education, but it throws them headfirst into World War II, the Chinese Revolution, and the Cold War. The real heart of it all is their struggle to figure out who they were in a world that was literally being torn in two.
So, why would these students travel halfway across the globe? Well, to get that, you have to understand the deep sense of crisis that was gripping China's Muslim elites, the Hui people, back in the early 1900s. And this quote from the journalist Ding Baochen, man, it just says it all. They were looking around and feeling like their community was being left behind, that their traditions were becoming stagnant while the rest of China was modernizing at lightning speed.
But, this feeling of anxiety didn't just lead to talk. It sparked something huge, the Sino-Muslim movement. This was a really ambitious project to basically reboot the entire Hui community. The goal was clear: modernize, educate, and make sure they had a real place in the new China that was emerging.
And this wasn't some fringe idea, not at all. It was a powerful coalition that brought together, well, the whole shebang. You had reform-minded scholars acting as the intellectual core. You had powerful military men, guys like Bai Chengxi, who were the patrons providing protection. You had modern thinkers shaping the message. And of course, you had wealthy merchants who were funding the entire operation. So with all this brain power and influence, what did they decide? The solution was crystal clear. It all came down to education. They started setting up these new modern Islamic schools all across China, schools that taught both religious studies and modern subjects. The mission was to raise a new class of leaders who could walk in both worlds, the Islamic and the modern, with total confidence. And from these brand new schools, they picked the absolute best and brightest for a mission that was, frankly, unprecedented. 33. That's it. Just 33 young men were chosen to go study at the very heart of Sunni Islamic learning, Al-Azhar University in Cairo. They would become the Chinese Azharites. Now this basically shows you the engine room of the whole project. Just look at that top line. The Beiping Changda Normal School was the absolute epicenter, sending almost 60% of the students. And this wasn't just any school, it was the flagship of this whole new vision, the main production line for these future leaders.
So the trip to Cairo didn't happen all at once.
It started small, with just 4 pioneers in 1931. But by 1933, they'd made such an impact that Al-Azhar, this 1,000-year-old institution, created a whole department just for them. The project peaked in 1937 with a big group sponsored by King Farouk of Egypt himself. But just look at that timeline. Right as they hit their stride, their entire mission is about to be turned upside down. Here's the thing. When they got to Cairo, they were slammed with a question they just couldn't ignore. Who were they, really? Chinese first or Muslim first? In Egypt, they were embraced as part of the global Islamic community, the ummah. But back home, the Chinese government, the Kuomintang, had a very, very different idea of who they were. And this right here, this lays out the incredible tug of war they were caught in. On one side, you have pan-Islamicism, this idea of a global brotherhood united by faith. On the other, you have the official government policy, which basically said, you're not a separate people, you're just Han Chinese who happen to be Muslim. And students like Ma Jian completely rejected this, writing that it was just a policy of forced assimilation. And this whole debate, it wasn't just academic. In 1937, it became a terrifyingly real life-or-death issue when Japan invaded China. All of a sudden, with Japan trying to win over Muslims in Asia, the Chinese government had a realization. They desperately needed these students. Their mission had changed. They were now citizen diplomats. And this is where it gets really brilliant. This is where they forged a new identity, not in a classroom, but right in the middle of a war. They became absolutely essential. They went to Mecca to fight Japanese propaganda during the Hajj pilgrimage. They pumped out over 300 articles in the Arab press, building support for China. And here's the masterstroke. They found a way to be both Chinese and Muslim by framing the war against Japan as a jihad, a holy struggle. It perfectly aligned their faith with their duty to their nation.
So it's like they'd finally cracked the code, right? They had figured out how to balance these two worlds. But that unity, which they had fought so hard to create, was about to be shattered. Just as World War II ends, the Chinese Civil War explodes, and the Cold War begins. These global forces would just tear their group to pieces. And this chart, it shows the aftermath. By 1949, those 33 classmates were scattered. You can see the vast majority, over 70%, ended up in the new People's Republic of China. A smaller group went with the nationalists to Taiwan. Their shared dream was now split right down the middle by the new Iron Curtain.
And their paths from here, wow, they could not have been more different. In mainland China, there was a glimmer of hope at first. The communists actually recognized the Hui as a distinct nationality, which was a huge deal. But that hope died fast, and most of them, including Ma Jian, were eventually persecuted. Meanwhile, the Azharites who went to Taiwan, they became Cold War assets, using their connections to condemn communism to the rest of the Muslim world. Former classmates were now ideological foes.
It's just such a tragic irony when you think about it. This whole movement began with a dream of creating a new, unified generation of leaders. But in the end, those very leaders were scattered, broken, and even pitted against each other by the massive, unstoppable forces of history. So what's the takeaway here? Well, even though the group itself met a tragic end, their legacy is profound, even if it's mostly forgotten. I mean, these are the students who built the modern bridge between China and the Middle East. They reformed Islamic education in China. One of them, Ma Jian, gave the Chinese-speaking world its first truly complete translation of the Quran. Their journey is just this incredibly powerful, hidden story about what identity really means.
And that brings us right back to today. Their story, from nearly a century ago, leaves us with a question that feels more urgent than ever. In our world, a world of global networks and tightening national borders, how do we balance all the different parts of who we are? Their struggle to navigate faith, ethnicity, and the nation is a challenge that, in many ways, we're all still facing.